Karnataka has witnessed the brutal murders of 4 women in less than a month, all by men who were known to the women. Men who were friends, lovers, fiancés. Men who could not handle rejection. The ruling Congress and the opposition parties are engaged in a political slugfest even as the actual cause of women's safety in the state lies forgotten. How do we make sense of such crimes? Why is the love jihad argument a dangerous trap? What is the state government's duty and responsibility in all this? The murder of 22-year-old Neha Hiremat on April 18th sent shockwaves across Karnataka. Protests raged across the country as Neha, the daughter of a Congress municipal councillor, was stabbed to death by her former classmate Fayaz Kondunayak at the college campus in Hubballi. Hours earlier, Bengaluru was rocked by a double murder when 46-year-old Suresh, married and with children, stabbed his 25-year-old colleague to death at a park in JP Nagar. Moments later, he was bludgeoned to death by the victim's mother. On May 9th, 33-year-old Prakash Omkarappa, angry that the district child protection unit had intervened in his engagement, beheaded his 16-year-old fiancée at Somarpet Taluk in Kodagu. In the most recent incident, 21-year-old Girish Sawant stabbed 20-year-old Anjali Ambige to death at her house on May 15th in Hubballi. In all these ghastly murders, men took to violence and aggression after their advances were shunned by the victims. Unable to handle rejection, the killings were a way for these men to avenge the apparent insult to their egos. However, what drew the most outrage from political parties was Neha's murder, considering that the state was in the grip of elections at the time. The BJP has called this a case of love jihad, a conspiracy theory propounded by Hindutva groups which claims that Muslim men are luring Hindu women under false pretenses of marriage in order to convert them to Islam. Now, following Anjali's murder, the opposition has launched an attack on the state government over a breakdown of law and order in the state. On May 19th, the DCP Law and Order of Hubballi Dharwad city was suspended in connection with Anjali's murder. But, irrespective of the party in power, crimes against women have continued unabated and have rarely ever received the attention they deserve. To better understand the socio-political factors that drive such crimes, let's speak to Madhu Bhushan, an independent activist and writer who was with Vimochana, a women's collective, for 3 decades and now works with the SIEDS Collective, Gamana, Mahila, Samooha, and Naveddu, Nilladiddare. Hi ma'am, welcome to Decode Karnataka. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So, in all the 4 murders that we are talking right now, the one common thread is that there is a sense of entitlement among men and an inability to take rejection. These are also, individual cases, but they have some sort of influence. At least one has influenced the other in the sense that in the Anjali murder case, the killer told the victim that if you don't listen to me, you will face Neha Hiremat's fate. But how do you see these cases? How do you explain such crimes?
From the long years of experience that we have had as part of the women's movement of, responding to, dealing with and understanding, violence against women, what we are seeing is actually a trend of, on the one hand, while there are, many laws and policies and spaces that are opening up, for women, on the other hand, we also see that the violence is only escalating. And it's escalating at all spheres, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual assaults, whether it is, violence at the workplace. I think it is, there is a steady increase in that. So to that extent, I think, what we are seeing, in terms of these deaths, should not come as a surprise. Of course they do. They do come as a surprise, and they are very shocking and they're very heartrending, because now it is like younger people, are falling victim to it, and it's a concern, not only on behalf of the young girls who are getting murdered, but it's also on behalf of the young boys, who are being driven to committing these kind of murders, and of course it is linked up with issues of, power, control, entitlement, inability to take rejection, it is, and this is linked up with, the old patriarchal kind of, roles that men have always been allowed to play. In today's context, the crisis and transition, I would say, is between older forms of patriarchy, which we thought we had disrupted, and I think we have, I think we have in a way disrupted it, challenged it, all of that. But we are caught between older patriarchies which we thought we had disrupted, but obviously not enough. We're caught between that and new resurgent, misogynies, and or masculinities rather, and these masculinities are built around the construct of this, this macho male, this macho male who, it is absolutely legitimate to have, to want, to desire, anything, and to fight for it, and that if you don't want it, you can react with in the most violent way possible. Though we have tried, from the women's movement to really introduce forms of masculinity that are more inclusive, that are not, so aggressive, that are not so violent. We are saying that, we must find, we can't say all of masculinity is bad, but how do you find more empathetic, more caring, masculinities, which are respectful, of the feminine, so we've also been, working on that, but today it is like the whole system is geared, only towards celebrating this new macho male, which is the only kind of model, for the young men. So I think, so like I said, this is the kind of, point of transition that we are caught in. So which is why, despite all the changes, that have been affected, so you have patriarchies which have been disrupted, because of which women are today finding their voice, and their autonomy, and exercising their choice. But on the other hand, you have, newer kind of masculinities, a newer form of patriarchies that are not able to accept this change. So I think the young people, in a way, are caught in this moment of transition. And, today we are, what I would say that we are looking at, the context that we have to understand is this aspirational society that we have created. An aspirational society which is today's global, capitalist world order. All economies are built around, aspiration and consumerism. Now there's nothing wrong in aspiring. There's nothing wrong in ambition, and that is what even the state policy is telling us. It's creating this aspirational society. It's creating want, and it's creating all these, malls, and it's creating all these, so that you can aspire, and then you can push yourself then to work for it. That's how you keep the wheels of the economy, growing. Fair enough, you want to create that kind of an economy. But on the other hand, then you must also create a socio-political cultural system in which these aspirations, can be actualized by everybody. Because what is happening today is that you're creating these aspirations, but it's only those people who are in positions of relative privilege, whether it's economic, or whether it's, caste, or whether it's class, or whether it's, today religion. It's only they who have access, to what they're aspiring to. And most of the others are just left aspiring with no means to realize it. So that sets off, a whole lot of frustrations which could turn to violence. Okay. So, like I said, to wrap up, to come back to the point I was trying to say, women are learning to express what they want. Maybe they're still dealing with it. They don't know where to kind of, still. So, they're still negotiating with that capacity, to kind of demand for what they want. They are changing, and they're also saying yes. They're also saying no. But unfortunately, the masculinist mindset that we have, listens to the yes, but it's incapable of listening to the no. And that is the old patriarchy. A woman can't say no. So this is this. So it's also like, if I want something, I should be able to have it. And then, okay, you can't fight with a mobile phone that you can't get. But you can fight with a girl who's saying no to you.
You made a point about autonomy, which I want to come back to. So central to the idea of love or marriage is this autonomy, whether to accept or reject a partner, whether of the same caste or different caste, same faith or different faith. But clearly, men who are committing these crimes don't believe that. Now, while we try to address this sort of patriarchal beliefs and attitudes that they hold, how can the law step up, and what can the state do to ensure that such cases are treated more stringently?
See, the issue is not only that of laws. I think social change is far more complex. And violence against women, while it's a matter of, it is a crime and it is a law and order problem, but I think it is a much deeper issue, and it also reflects the kind of like I said, the complex realities that we are dealing with. So yes, of course, the laws, I mean, there have been a lot of changes in the laws, and that is no thanks to the state or the government. It's really thanks to movements on the ground, organizations and movements that have been working with these issues on the ground, that have really pushed for changes. Like, for example, any change that you see today in the laws on sexual violence have come about because of the women's movement, post Nirbhaya, the kind of, the work that was done, or whether you take the Domestic Violence Act, all these various laws, have really come about because of the push that's been given by the women's movement. So I think the state has to, once it puts into place these laws, or these programs or these policies, it must become part of it must become more systemic, and it has to be internalized at a far, deeper level. Like, it's not that, people are asking, so we'll give them a law, and then we'll die, and then we'll give them a law, and then we'll give them some, shelters and all that, and in the budget we will give them some money that will come. In 1 year there will be a budget for it, the next year there'll be no budget for it. So you see, there's no systemic way in which the governments or the state is dealing with the issue of violence. It's dealing with it in a very piecemeal kind of a way. So at the one hand, you have to have attitudinal change. On the other hand, you must have policies that are more structurally, kind of embedded, and are not dependent on whoever, is the current secretary or the current, this thing. It must be, there must be allocations which are, which are not just according to schemes, but are there as ongoing institutionalized programs. So they must take it seriously, and introduce, structural changes, and relentless sensitization. And you must also, and I think the police who are, also implementing these laws, it's not just that they must be sensitized, but there must be a deterrence, that if they're not, responding in a way which is, which is befitting the seriousness of the violence, then there must be some action taken, so that there is a deterrence. Because there's a lot of acceptance of violence against women even today. Because even today, women are still blamed for the violence, even today. So that whole victim blaming approach, is something that has to be addressed in a very systemic way.
Neha's murder specifically was given a communal color because we were in the thick of elections at the time that the murder happened. It was turned into this poll narrative for electoral gains. BJP leaders called for a CBI inquiry, claimed it was a case of love jihad. But in 2020, the Ministry of Home Affairs said in the Lok Sabha that no central agency has ever reported a case of love jihad. So what harm can such political scaremongering do to women's cause and crimes such as these against women?
Well, I would say it's a little more than political scaremongering, and particularly the cases that you refer to, like if you take Neha's case, okay, it is not so much of political scaremongering as much as a very deliberate kind of, consolidation of an agenda, and the agenda is that of building, a majoritarian kind of political system, which they call Hindutva, and I think that's very clear in the way, the current, the central government has taken up cases. Like, what are the cases that they've taken up? They've taken up cases of Neha, where the boy was a Muslim. They've taken up cases of love jihad, wherever the violators have been Muslim, they've addressed that. But our question is, violence against women, it's not only, behind every story of violence is not a Muslim perpetrator and a Hindu victim. Violence against women is something that cuts across, all classes, communities, religions, etc. So I think they betray themselves, by selectively, picking up these cases. They betray themselves and the agenda that they're trying to promote. And unfortunately, like we were talking earlier, like, and especially when you look at the elections, and I think perhaps this must be the most shameful election that we have witnessed, the most shameful general elections, because I think every day, you've had to deal with one issue or the other of violence against women that has been given this communal color. What is their concern for women? Is their concern only for, please be concerned about Neha. We all are concerned about Neha. We all came out and protested and stood for Neha. But we also stood for Ruxana. We also stood for Bilkis Banu. Did they do that? It helps their cause of consolidating their vote bank and getting votes. That's all that it does. But it does nothing to further, the agenda of really ensuring that you have a India that is safe for all women. And I think we must see that they've done this systematically in all cases. We've seen this, whether it was in Bilkis Banu, where they released the rapists, before they had, their time. Not only, what was horrifying there was not only that they released the rapists, but the justification for it. Saying that, the person who was in the committee that released the men, the ones who were convicted, said that those men were from the Brahmin community, so they could not have possibly committed this crime. So does it mean then that because you come from a particular caste or a particular class or a particular community, that you have inbuilt impunity, or that you don't commit these kind of crimes? Are men from the Hindu community, not capable of becoming violators? And are women who are, who are women victims from the minority communities, are they not to be seen as women who are victims of violence? What is this kind of, what is this agenda that is, that is absolutely not only trivializing violence against women, but in a way endorsing the most horrific forms of, misogyny, which also is, legitimizing a kind of casteist and communal kind of politics within which violence against women is getting justified. That shows the most callous form of politics and hypocritical kind of politics that one has ever seen.
Systemic forces that perpetuate violence and inequality have dragged down women for years. In the current climate, arguments that women need not guarantee schemes but guaranteed protection serve nothing but a political purpose. Women need both safety and welfare, and the powers that be must understand and act accordingly. For more such analysis, tune into Decode Karnataka with me, Nalme Nachiyar, every Wednesday. For more such stories and videos, follow The Hindu.